This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hundreds of medical workers from the Chinese army arrive in the city of Wuhan to help fight coronavirus. Ethiopian Airlines says it will not suspend flights to China over coronavirus. And 62 civilians killed in 1 week in DRC's Beni territory. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme, we bring you the latest from Egypt and Ethiopia over the deal on the filling of the Grand Renaissance Dam. And in sports, FIFA President Gianni Infantino urges Africa's soccer leaders to consider hosting AFCON every 4 years. We start in Tanzania, where at least 20 people have been killed and dozens of others injured in a stampede at a stadium during a church service. Government officials say the incident happened on Saturday evening in Moshi town, near to the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro. Hundreds of people packed the stadium, and the stampede occurred when the worshippers rushed to be anointed with what's called blessed oil. Authorities fear the death toll could rise due to the size of the crowd and dark conditions at the time. Well, CGTN's Isaac Lukando joins me now with more on that story from Tanzania. Isaac, this was a packed stadium last night. What more do we know about the number of fatalities and the casualties?
Well, what we do know from the authorities in Moshi, Kilimanjaro region in the north of Tanzania, is that the number stands at 20 people dead, the majority of whom were female. We understand that there was a male in the number, 15 women and 4 children in that number. And most of these fatalities were taken to the Mawenzi Referral Hospital, which is the regional hospital in Kilimanjaro. But the authorities are still trying to track other people that possibly went to other hospitals in the aftermath of the incident, so that they can compile a proper report on the actual number of those dead and injured. So the number stands at 20 dead and 16 injured. And
tell us some more about how this happened. What caused the stampede?
Oh, well, the stampede was caused, happened at a gathering, a Christian gathering in Moshi. It was supposed to be a crusade, a prayer meeting for about 3 days, organized by a local church, and the visiting preacher, who has a tendency of asking his congregants to walk over blessed oil, did the same in this incident in the final day of the prayer meeting. And they were to do this as they walked out of the arena. And there was a particular gate that was in use, and they were to walk over the oil and out to go home. And unfortunately, this is where the stampede happened because of the rush of people trying to get there first and back home as early as possible.
So this stampede happened as a result of them trying to get to this blessed oil. Tell us a bit more about the pastor, the prosperity gospel pastor that uses this type of oil. Can you tell us a bit more about this particular congregation and the pastor?
Well, this particular pastor, Boniface Mwamposa, is a very popular pastor, especially here in the commercial hub, Dar es Salaam. Very popular with congregants numbering in the thousands, and is known for, quote-unquote, blessing his congregants after they walk over blessed oil. And it has been a growing trend in Tanzania, with different pastors offering either anointed oil or anointed water for their congregants. And so those seeking to find solutions to their problems often gather in their thousands to hear preaching and hopefully walk away with a blessing that will solve their problems.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was Isaac Lukanda there in Tanzania on the church stampede that happened last night. On to the latest of the coronavirus outbreak now. The first death outside China has been reported in the Philippines. The patient was a Chinese national who arrived from Wuhan last month. In China, 304 people have died and more than 360 have recovered. The total number of confirmed cases in China has surpassed 14,400. And over 100,000 people in the country are under medical observation. There are 146 confirmed cases in other countries. Japan has 20 and Thailand has 19. Well, the epicenter of this outbreak, the city of Wuhan, has handed over the first of 2 temporary hospitals to the Chinese military medical team. The Huashen Hospital was finished in just 9 days with a capacity of 1,000 beds. Patients will begin arriving on Monday. Separately, hundreds of medical workers from China's army have arrived in the crisis city of Wuhan. CGTN's Zhao Yunfei has more.
Military freight planes from People's Liberation Army have arrived here at Wuhan Tianhe International Airport. They are carrying some medical team and medical supplies to support the city. Soon they got transferred to the newly built Huashen Hospital, which is ready to hand over to the army.
When we received the order, we did not hesitate. The country needs us as the epidemic worsens. As soldiers, we should be on the front line.
A front line which many of the team have seen before, having experiences during the 2003 SARS epidemic and the more recent Ebola outbreaks in Africa. Before their departure, the teams went through sophisticated training process. They say they're now ready for the challenge, despite knowing very little about what lies ahead.
This mission is special. We are not familiar with the environment. We have sufficient preparation, but we don't know how long it will last. There are still some uncertainties.
Uncertainty that becomes even greater by having to work in a special hospital that sprung up in less than 2 weeks. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
Well, let's get you more from Zhu Zinshen joining us live from Wuhan. What is the situation on the ground right now?
Yes, Karen, first let's just refresh the data, the numbers for a little bit. And confirmed cases across China, over 14,400 to be exact, and more than that number. And suspected cases, almost 20,000. And experts are saying the numbers, those 2 numbers will continue to rise, but not for long. Some people are not expecting it will rise for long. And the number of patients died off the virus today. The number of patients who cleared from the virus is also on the rise, and now more than a number of patients died from the virus. And Wuhan is still the worst hit region with 2/3 of the death toll right here in this city. And local hospitals in Wuhan have been running low on beds and medical supply, and only fewer than 200 hospital beds available now. But thousands of suspected cases in the city and still waiting to be checked in. And there are long queues outside the city's fever clinics. And in the city of Wuhan just put out new measures to help prevent these suspected cases from spreading the disease. Now the city would have a special arrangement to isolate suspected cases and put them under medical surveillance, offering free meal and board. One of the emergency hospitals, as we have mentioned previously, has been top and ready to take in patients, and with the military medics, 14,000 of them arrived in 1,400 arrived in Wuhan today, and they are ready to take in patients tomorrow. Karen.
And tell us a little bit more about the situation and the condition of foreign nationals living in the city.
So Wuhan is in fact a fairly international city here in China, and thousands of foreign nationals are living here in the city, and it has some pretty prestigious universities with international students. And previously we were speaking to international students, exchange students, at one of its top universities called Huazhong University of Science and Technology. And they said that the school right now has special counselors to check on them, to check with them, because of the language barrier and the unfamiliarity of the city, and the school offers advisors and counselors to check on them and offer them to give them medical supplies like facial masks. And also, just yesterday, one of my colleagues just spoke to another foreign national living here in Wuhan who is a horse breaker from Australia. And despite his embassy has been urging him to leave the city, and he said he has trust in China to deal with the situation, and he'd rather stay here in Wuhan with his 27 racing horses.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was Xu Xinshen there on the latest from Wuhan on the coronavirus. Well, Wuhan's neighbour to the east, Huanggang City, has become the second city to hit 1,000 cases. 15 people have died there. With a population of more than 7 million, the city has announced a temporary ban on going out in public, allowing only one person per family to shop for groceries every 2 days. The confinement will be effective until next Sunday. Hundreds of kilometers away from Hebei, the city of Wenzhou in Zhejiang province has launched a similar ban to keep people at home. The city of 9 million has become the hardest hit outside Hebei, with 241 cases as of Friday. Wenzhou has one of the highest population densities in China. More than 200,000 people from Wenzhou run businesses in Wuhan. Meanwhile, thousands of doctors from across China have come to Wuhan to help. They're on rotating long shifts around the clock. CG10's Su Xinshen again followed one of them.
感觉怎样？吃得习惯吗？
还行吧，因为能有这个条件已经不错了。
We caught up Dr. Hu Weidong during his dinner time before a night shift, which started at 7 p.m. After a few quick bites, he went to get ready.
I'm packing a few things for the ward. This is an adult diaper. We need to wear protective suits while in the ward. No food or bathroom breaks during the shift of 6 to 7 hours.
Gansu province, where Hu comes from, is in northeast China, 1,000 kilometers away from Wuhan.
现在不光是器械。
We are not only experiencing an equipment shortage, but more importantly, a shortage in protective gear. We are using a lot of it, so the demand is high.
Due to the shortage, my crew and I couldn't get suits to film inside the ward, but Dr. Hu was kind enough to film a tour inside for us.
我现在进入病区了，这是我们。
I've entered the ward. This is Ward 19 for fever patients. Doctors are changing shifts right over there. Look at this. Everyone is wearing full body protection. After putting on the suit, the isolation gown and goggles, our breath will soon make the goggles foggy. It is not comfortable. This is where we do our prescription and medical records. This is the treatment room. The nurses are also changing shifts.
After 6 hours in the ward, Dr. Hu came out.
There are few staffers during the night. If there's an emergency, there is less help.
It's past midnight. Dr. Hu got some packaged bread home to fuel his body. With no time to indulge his taste buds while saving people, he said, anything to feed on is good enough. Xu Xingchen, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
In the wake of the coronavirus outbreak, several major airlines around the world have announced suspension of flights to China. However, Ethiopian Airlines has not followed suit. Arguably the most influential airline in Africa, Ethiopian Airlines reaffirmed its support to the Chinese government and its people. It further insists that it'll work with all relevant Chinese and Ethiopian agencies to protect passengers and crew members from the disease. This in full compliance with the guidelines of the International Air Transport Association, the WHO and the Center for Disease Control.
Global health emergency means precaution has to be taken, the right measures have to be taken to screen passengers, to prevent any transmission or the transfer of this virus. So WHO has given all airlines in all countries what they are supposed to do. So we are exactly following WHO procedures, but WHO has not said or has not banned any travel, as you know. So we have no reason to suspend.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including African countries ponder the impact of US travel ban as Trump expands list. And we look into the crisis of teenage pregnancies in Africa.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where authorities say 62 civilians have been killed by suspected Islamist rebels in the eastern part of the country. The attacks were carried out over the last 6 days in the territory of Beni, where an Ebola outbreak has claimed many lives. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
The Congolese government says rebels of the Allied Democratic Forces were behind the killing of 62 civilians in Beni territory. It says the army is closing in on the rebels and will dismantle all their networks. Rights groups in the eastern DRC town say the killings were carried out in 10 villages. Women and children were among the victims hacked to death. The killing of civilians by rebels intensified after the launch of a military offensive against them by the Congolese army last October. The DRC army has reported killing senior ADF commanders and capturing some of their strongholds in Beni. But the killings of civilians have continued and residents are now living in fear. An international monitor of conflict in eastern DRC says the latest attack has increased the death toll to 312. The UN estimates that more than 100 armed groups are operating in eastern DRC. The Allied Democratic Forces is one of the notorious groups that's reported to have killed more than 1,000 civilians since 2014. Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Washington is expanding a list of countries whose citizens face strict travel restrictions to the US. President Trump is suspending all immigrant visas for people from Nigeria, Eritrea, Kyrgyzstan and Myanmar. Sudanese and Tanzanian nationals are also affected. CGTN's Sarah Walton reports now from New York.
People living in these 6 countries are soon going to find it much harder to come and live in the United States. Once the restrictions come into force on February 22nd, most would not be allowed an immigrant visa, which would let them remain permanently in the US. The current travel ban was introduced by President Trump in 2017 and now covers Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Venezuela and the DPRK. But unlike the first ban, people from the new countries added will continue to qualify for non-immigrant visas. So that covers temporary stays, including tourist travel. Now, the Trump administration says the new restrictions are meant to force those countries to tighten their security and data sharing operations, to limit the chance that somebody could travel from those places with the intent of harming the US. But it has faced widespread criticism because many of the countries targeted have large Muslim populations. Particularly controversial is the inclusion of Myanmar, where the government has been accused of acts of genocide against the minority Muslim community, charges the government strongly denies. But it's thought the place most impacted will be Nigeria. It's Africa's most populous country, and the US issued more than 8,000 immigrant visas to people from there in 2018. Now, immigration support groups have called the ban discriminatory. Nancy Pelosi, a congressional leader of opposition Democrats in the US, has called it outrageous and callous. But the Department for Homeland Security says it is willing to work with the countries affected to make improvements so they can get off the list. Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
Well, Tanzania is one of 6 countries that will be affected by this expanded version of the US travel ban. The US administration says Tanzania's inclusion comes as a result of failing to meet US security and information sharing standards. An official statement is yet to be issued by the government with regard to the new travel restrictions. CGTN's Isaac Lucando has more.
In 2018, the US issued 290 immigration visas to Tanzanians. Under the new restrictions, Tanzanian nationals will no longer be allowed to apply for diversity visas, which lead to permanent residency in the United States. The announcement has some Tanzanians concerned.
We have relatives and friends who live there. We have various activities that we share with the US. So when this happens, thinking about it deeply, effects must be there.
Deeply thinking, lazima kutakuwa na athari zao.
Let's leave this to the President. I know with his ability and the good relations he has with the United States, along with the ability of our Foreign Minister, Palamagamba Kabudi, they will find a solution to this.
The new rules, however, will not affect people going to the US for temporary stays, including visitors, those doing business, or people seeking medical treatment. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
To Nigeria now, where over 31.5% of teenagers between the ages of 15 and 19 either have children or are currently pregnant. And the figures continue to soar. The UN has been pushing for comprehensive sex education to reduce teenage pregnancies and sex-related health issues. But some societal norms and traditions may be slowing its implementation in the country. CG10's Kelechi Emekalam has more on that.
A team of health volunteers teaching teenage girls on reproductive health and personal hygiene. Teenage pregnancy has become a public health emergency in Nigeria, as in most African countries. But not much attention is being paid to it. More than 31% of girls are either pregnant or already mothers. That's why the UN wants comprehensive sexuality education integrated into the national curriculum.
It's something that should be, it should be introduced for the benefits, of the children, both male and female, to educate them about not just their bodies, but, their ability to blend in society and to, work against social vices.
If you teach children age-appropriate information as to the parts of their body, if they understand what the parts of their body is, it's easier to ward off sexual violence.
Many more teens and younger children are already sexually active in Nigeria. Sexual activities are fueled by child marriage, peer pressure, and exposure to the internet. Adults in Africa shy away from talking about sex with their children, so youngsters aren't equipped with the right information to protect themselves.
The basic practice
especially even fueled by the regulatory bodies, and I would use the Nigerian Broadcast Commission as one of the regulatory bodies. The basic practice that is enabled by these regulatory bodies is that it makes you feel guilty about telling children the names of their private parts. And so in the event of violation, you hear children tell us things like, uncle put his banana in my mouth. Banana is for consumption. So when you force parents to describe a penis using banana, it means that you have forced them to give wrong information to the child.
The surge in cases of teenage pregnancies make it clear that the status quo should change. A deliberate mind shift and action plan is required to begin to educate youngsters on the dangers of adolescent sex. For now, experts say it's about time the government and other key players in the education sector invest in comprehensive sexuality education and support teacher training programs across the country. Kelechi Emekalam, CGT and Abuja, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, in Uganda, social workers are pushing for a policy that will help keep teenage mothers in school. They're concerned that the rate of school dropouts due to teenage pregnancy is on the rise because of the lack of a re-entry policy for teenage mothers. CGTN's Hilary Ayeseko reports.
Sewing her life back together, 16-year-old Namaganda dropped out of school because of pregnancy.
I didn't make a good decision and I didn't think about it. I just did it, and what happened? I got pregnant, and now I'm out of school.
And she's not alone. Many pregnant girls come to this teenage center for support.
A day we can receive 2 girls every day who are pregnant. That means in a week it will be about 10 girls who have come, because we don't open up during weekends. So if it is 10 girls a day who are pregnant, the magnitude must be really, really high.
According to Uganda's Bureau of Statistics, 1 in every 4 teenage girls between the ages of 15 and 19 get pregnant annually. And Uganda does not have a comprehensive policy on the readmission of teenage mothers in schools. But this local NGO is helping them acquire vocational skills.
We take them through the training in vocational skills, and the skills which will be for life.
Every day, about 30 girls gather here to learn new skills in tailoring. Trainers here believe the skill will help them start a new life after they've dropped out of school. The social workers also want government to design a new policy on sex education for schools.
Educate the girls what is out there if you're sexually active in schools and everything, because all of them, most of the girls we have as P7 dropouts, senior 4 dropouts, so they should know their time when they start menstruating, the dangers, the preventions and everything.
The government introduced abstinence-based sex education, but it is yet to be effective. Social workers now believe if such policies are introduced, they could help keep girls in school. And for teenage mothers like Namaganda, it's another opportunity to pursue their career. Hilary Ayeseko, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, teenage pregnancies are a rising concern for most developing countries. That's according to the World Health Organization. They say that 11% of the 16 million childbirths worldwide are to teenage mums. 95% of births are in low to middle-income countries like South Africa. It can come with a serious health risk and contributes to higher poverty levels. CGTN's Julie Shear reports.
Scores of South African teenagers find themselves preparing for motherhood. Close to 100,000 girls, some as young as 10, fell pregnant in 2017. The LifeLink Pregnancy Crisis Centre is one of many private facilities in Johannesburg helping emotional distraught children with nowhere else to turn.
A lot of them are very uncertain as to what's going to happen. Am I pregnant? How would my parents react if I tell them that I'm pregnant? And so we do a lot of counselling right off the bat as far as the emotions are concerned. A lot of them think that their parents are going to throw them out or just kind of leave them in the lurch, but that's not the experience that we've had.
At least 25% of women who walk through these doors are pregnant teenagers. The center helps these young moms through their pregnancies by providing emotional and financial support.
So we do land up supporting a lot of single moms who have chosen to keep their babies for whatever reason. And we support them for the first year of their baby's life.
Chris Peter's family was in total shock when daughter fell pregnant not long after she matriculated.
Nobody in the house had a job at the time. I didn't work, my husband didn't work. She was studying. How we got the money was with our savings to put her in the university. So there now money problems come in, you know, finances, what we're going to do, how we're going to support the fourth person in the house.
Family support is critical for first-time teen mothers who could face serious emotional trauma and health risks.
We have the support from family and friends. So that helped. So my craziness was right out by the door. And we were just thinking now of her and the baby. And while she was pregnant, you know, towards the 8 months, I think everybody in the house have anxiety. The family had, we in the house, the friends, because now it's time now for baby to come.
Most of the stigma associated with teen pregnancy has dissipated, with young girls still allowed to finish school. But without a job and proper support structures, these girls could stay trapped in a life of poverty. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
All of the business news coming up for you after the break, including... We bring you the latest from Egypt and Ethiopia over the deal on the filling of the Grand Renaissance Dam. And from Somalia, a story of a man making a living by combing the Indian Ocean for seashells.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We bring you now the latest from Egypt and Ethiopia over the deal on the filling of the Grand Renaissance Dam, and from Somalia, a story of a man making a living by combing the Indian Ocean for seashells. Well, back to the top story here, Washington says Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia have reached an agreement on the filling of the reservoir for the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. An agreement of the dam's operation is yet to be achieved in another round of talks in the US capital, scheduled later this month. CG10's Adel El Makroui has more on the agreements and the challenges that remain.
Scheduled initially for 2 days, talks between foreign and water ministers of Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia stretched for 4. The U.S. Department of Treasury, the host of the talks, says an agreement has been reached about the filling of the dam's reservoir, which has been the most pressing issue for Egypt.
It's a partial agreement regarding 3 main points. Definitely, the 2 points agreed upon are the most important. Filling the reservoirs is the process where Egypt and Sudan cut portions of their water in favor of the dam, and the operation is how much water Ethiopia will release.
The 3 countries have agreed on a stage-based schedule for filling the reservoir. They've also accepted a mitigation mechanism for the filling and operation of the dam during prolonged drought periods. Egypt has signed the agreement. Ethiopia, however, has postponed its signature till the end of the month.
That sparks fears that Ethiopia might not commit fully to what has been agreed upon in this round. Egypt Foreign Ministry announced that Ethiopia still has remarks that elongates the process of course. The 3 countries, however, agreed on a deadline of 30 days to finalize a deal.
The 3 countries have not agreed yet on a platform to resolve future disputes over the dam's operation. They still need to create a detailed plan to implement their deal and continue studies about the environmental impact of the dam.
It was expected to be the final round of talks in these 5 years-long negotiations. Hanging issues, however, have forced the three countries to schedule another meeting on February 12. And the deadline for a comprehensive deal has once again been postponed, this time until the end of the month. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The talks between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan on mainly the sticking issues of the filling and operation of the dam took almost 2 months now. But on Saturday, an announcement by the United States Treasury Department revealed an agreement is finally reached. The Ethiopian Ministry of Water, Energy and Irrigation has confirmed the following deals are made. For example, on a schedule for a stage-based filling plan of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a mitigation mechanism for the filling of the GERD during prolonged drought and prolonged periods of dry years, and a mitigation mechanism for the annual long-term operation of the GERD in prolonged drought and prolonged periods of dry years. Now, the meeting of the foreign and water ministers of the three countries in DC has also discussed and agreed to finalize a mechanism for the annual and long-term operation of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. In normal hydrological conditions, a coordination mechanism, provisions for the resolution of disputes and the sharing of information. However, these agreements are yet to be signed, perhaps in the coming few days, as per the information we have. Meanwhile, Ethiopians are eagerly awaiting to hear the details of the agreement reached in Washington, D.C. Grumtara, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
A new Accelerator lab has been launched in South Africa. The lab, one of 60 worldwide, is part of an initiative run by the United Nations Development Programme. These labs provide a base for young innovators to find solutions to challenges facing the country and the world. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu tells us more.
It's a 3-year program that will run in conjunction with South Africa's Department of Science and Innovation. The aim is to find innovative ways to achieve the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
We have 60 labs operating in 78 countries globally, and out of these 60 labs, 29 of them are in Africa. So the idea is to make sure that we connect.
Over $2 million is being invested in this project and will fund the initiative over the next 3 years, providing seed funding for those that want to develop their ideas. South Africa needs urgent solutions to growing unemployment, inequality and poverty.
The challenges are enormous, and we need an interrelated, integrated approach to these challenges. And therefore, what the Accelerator Lab does is look at the whole ecosystem of innovations from down the local level to the national level, map them out, create, synergies, harmonize them so that they really truly respond to the actual needs of the country.
What we are really trying to do is create the world's largest learning network around development, and trying to understand how do we integrate those people who aren't really part of development conversations, for example, grassroots innovators. How do we get them into the mainstream conversation, specifically around the youth?
Some of the young innovators already part of the program were encouraging.
We're working on teacher development. So if you think about teachers being the driving force in learning, in South Africa, there's over 433,000 teachers. And so what we're doing is through online social networking communities, we are building online professional learning communities where teachers get access to professional development opportunities.
Pink Care is a social enterprise that specifically deals with eco-friendly menstrual products. And at the moment we have 3 products, which is the washable pad, the cup and the biodegradable disposable pads.
We make water filters using macadamia nut shells. There's a lot of macadamia nuts in Limpopo, and they just take the nuts, like what's inside, and then we take the shells and then we turn that into activated carbon, and we use that to make water filters.
Young people are being urged to share their ideas and be part of the solution. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
On to Somalia now, where CGTN's Abdul Aziz Below brings us a story of Kasim Mohammed, a young beach comber who makes a living combing a popular beach near to Mogadishu.
It's early morning at this tiny coastal fishing village on the outskirts of Mogadishu. 40-year-old Kasim Mohammed, a beachcomber, is briefing these divers as they embark on a crucial task of combing the Indian Ocean for seashells and other valuable pieces of jewelry, including sea glass. Since childhood, Kasim has been combing the sea together with his father, a culture he hopes to transfer to his children. However, his divers lack the right gear for the task ahead. Instead, they are forced to improvise oxygen cylinders and spend less time underwater.
I incur high cost when seeking some of these products. I have to hire divers and skiffs who spend many hours in the deep waters looking for various types of seashells. We are seeking financial support from local banks as well as well-wishers who can support us through skiff boats, swimming costumes, goggles and oxygen cylinders to improve our business.
Maki is one of Qasim's long-term divers and the man tasked with leading the hunt for sea jewelry. He tells me that recent adventures in the high seas have not proved successful due to strong winds and lack of proper diving equipment.
Every day we wake up early in the morning, rent a skiff boat and venture into the deep sea. We spend at least 6 hours searching for seashells, depending on our luck. We go out in groups of 3 and 4 every time. Today we were not lucky. We only managed to get 4 shells.
On some occasions, precious shells and other jewelry are washed ashore. Fishermen and local swimmers bring them to this tiny village at a small price. Located just a few minutes' drive from the main city's center lies Jazeera Beach, where hundreds of young people flock here every Friday to spend time with friends and loved ones. It's on such a day that Qasim and his friends hope to make a good sale. But business hasn't been good lately. Qasim says fewer foreigners visit the beach that is less than 20 kilometers from the city's center. However, residents are now becoming regular visitors to Jazeera Beach.
We sell the shells at different prices. We sell each shell at $10 to foreigners, half the price to Somalis returning from abroad, and $2 to $3. We try to target people who know the meaning of seashell and other pieces of jewelry. It can be used for decoration in homes, businesses, and offices.
As stability returns to major urban centers, Qasim says that he's receiving business orders from tourism and decoration companies who hope to use sea artifacts to decorate homes and business premises. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Jazeera Beach, Somalia.
A symposium on the challenges of the restitution of African cultural heritage was held in Abidjan last week. The objective was to provide a framework for African countries demanding the return of all the works taken by foreign powers during the colonial period. Tuli Shabalala has more on that story.
The event brought together researchers, university professors and cultural experts from several West African countries. For 2 days, panelists discussed the challenges related to the restitution of African artworks.
We must prepare to receive the artwork that will be returned. This preparation requires solid documentation so that the objects receive special attention. It is also necessary to set up the necessary infrastructure and to take stock of the infrastructure that already exists and build new ones if necessary to better receive all the art objects.
Nearly 400,000 works of African art are displayed in European museums. They were looted, sold or stolen during the colonization period. African nations have been demanding for the return of the cultural artifacts.
First, we need to identify objects that are very rare and no longer found in Africa. We also need to find art objects that have been stolen. However, we are aware that if we speak directly about restitution, we know that the Belgian authorities will surely refuse. But our strategy starts with the negotiation of an inventory of all the objects in colonial museums. It is at this stage that we will think about the question of restitution itself.
There have been concerns over the maintenance and conservation of works once returned.
The case of safety is a question of responsibility. When the country has decided to be responsible for this situation, which involves major projects such as the construction of museums with all the guarantees and international standards of conservation, we should no longer have any concerns. If the country also decides to rehabilitate existing museums through a national conservation workshop to recruit and train people in this field, everything should go well at this level. It was not a priority in the past, but now it is.
15,000 cultural objects are to be returned to Côte d'Ivoire. Most of the pieces are in museums in France, Germany, Belgium, Britain and Austria. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Ugandan boxing promoters equip teenage mothers with self-defense skills in Kampala.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Uganda, boxing promoters are equipping teenage mothers with self-defense skills in the slums of the capital, Kampala. They are concerned that many young mothers in the slum areas are being attacked, but they cannot defend themselves. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga attended one of these training sessions and filed this report.
Punching her way out of trouble, Joy Namabiro is mastering self-defense skills, and she's already started putting these skills to use.
2 men attacked me and they wanted to take my money, but I was able to defend myself.
Helen Baleke is the brains behind this women's empowerment program.
Most affected are teenage mothers who stay in the slum. Drug abusers rape them and abandon them with their children.
Because of the lack of parental care and acceptance by their families, young mothers often suffer stigma.